when she was studying business administration and I was finishing my degree in environmental science. After graduation, she landed a position as an office manager at a financial planning firm, while I found work with the State Environmental Protection Agency conducting water quality assessments. Our relationship naturally progressed through the typical milestones of young couples establishing their independence and building a future together. She moved into my apartment after dating for 18 months. We adopted a rescue dog together after 2 years, and I proposed during a camping trip in the Blue Ridge Mountains after 3.5 years. The engagement period had been everything I thought it should be, filled with venue visits, cake tastings, and endless discussions about guest lists and seating arrangements. My fiancée threw herself into wedding planning with an enthusiasm that sometimes bordered on obsession, spending hours browsing bridal websites and coordinating with the vendors. I appreciated her attention to detail because wedding planning felt overwhelming to me, and I was grateful to have a partner who seemed genuinely excited about every aspect of our upcoming ceremony. Looking back now, I realize that her intense focus on the wedding might have been her way of avoiding dealing with whatever was happening behind my back. The first sign that something was wrong came about 2 months before our wedding date, when she started receiving phone calls at odd hours that she would take in another room. When I asked her about these calls, she explained that one of her bridesmaids was going through a difficult breakup and needed emotional support during late-night crying sessions. This explanation seemed reasonable at the time because I knew her friend had recently ended a long-term relationship and was struggling with the emotional aftermath. My fiancé had always been the type of person her friends turned to during personal crises, so I thought nothing of her stepping up to provide comfort during someone else's difficult period. The second red flag appeared about 6 weeks before the wedding, when she began staying late at work longer than usual. She claimed that her boss was pushing everyone harder due to a busy season, and that she needed to demonstrate her dedication to secure a promotion she had been hoping for. Again, this made perfect sense because advancement opportunities in her field were competitive, and showing extra commitment during important projects could make the difference in salary negotiations. I supported her career ambitions and never questioned the additional hours she was putting in at the office during what I assumed was a particularly demanding period. 3 weeks before our wedding, she started being secretive about her phone in ways that seemed suspicious, given the nature of our open device policy. She would place it face down during dinner, take it to the bathroom with her all the time, and keep it close to her side of the bed, where I could not accidentally see the screen. I even noticed one time in the middle of the night, she took her phone with her. When I mentioned that she seemed more protective of her privacy than usual, she laughed and said she was coordinating surprise elements for our wedding that she did not want me to see. The explanation was plausible enough that I chose to believe her rather than push for more details about what she might be planning. The night that changed everything happened while she was taking a shower, after we had spent the entire evening addressing wedding invitations and finalizing last-minute details with our caterer. Her phone was charging on the nightstand beside our bed when a notification popped up on the lock screen. The message preview showed enough to make me question, what the fuck did I just see? Looking forward to tomorrow night. Beautiful. The contact's name was Larry, with no last name or other identifying information. I knew every Larry in her life, her cousin, her coworker, her college friend, and none of them would send a message like that to an engaged woman 3 days before her wedding. Using the passcode she had never hidden from me during our 4 years together, so I unlocked her phone to investigate further. What I found was worse than I had imagined. She had a separate messaging app installed, one designed for privacy and automatic message deletion. The conversation with Larry only showed the past few hours of messages, as everything older had already been automatically deleted according to the app's settings. But what remained was explicit enough to confirm my worst fears about what had been happening behind my back. I quickly discovered that Larry was not the only person she was communicating with through this hidden app. There were active conversations with at least 3 other men, all using first names only, all containing messages that no engaged woman should be sending. The timestamps on these conversations showed they had been happening during the exact time she claimed to be working late or helping her heartbroken friend through her breakup. I took screenshots of everything before the messages could automatically delete themselves, knowing I would need proof of what I had discovered. I sat on our bed, staring at the evidence of her infidelity while listening to her singing in the bathroom, probably unaware that her entire world was about to collapse. Part of me wanted to storm into the bathroom and confront her immediately, but another part of me needed time to process what I had discovered. The shower stopped running, and I quickly placed her phone back on the nightstand, exactly where she had left it, hoping she wouldn't notice that I had been looking through her private messages. When she came out of the bathroom wrapped in a towel, she smiled at me the same way she had smiled every other night for the past 4 years. I placed her phone back on the nightstand exactly where she had left it and tried to compose myself before she emerged from the bathroom. The evidence I had just uncovered felt surreal, as if I were living inside someone else's nightmare rather than experiencing my own reality. 3 days before our wedding, with guests already traveling from out of state and final payments made to vendors, I was discovering that the woman I thought I knew had been systematically betraying me for months. The woman I thought I was going to marry in 3 days was a stranger who had mastered the art of compartmentalizing her deception. I waited until she settled into bed beside me before I finally spoke. Instead of asking questions or allowing her to lie, I told her that I was aware of Larry and the others. She looked like she saw a ghost after I said that, and for the first time in our relationship, she looked genuinely terrified. She immediately began crying and begging me not to leave her, claiming that none of it meant anything and that she was just scared about getting married. According to her tearful explanation, she had been having panic attacks about commitment and had sought validation from other men to convince herself that she was making the right choice. She insisted that she had never actually met any of these men in person and that everything had been limited to online conversations and photo exchanges. When I showed her the screenshots I had taken, including messages about meeting locations and times that coincided with her supposed late work nights, she broke down further. Her story changed immediately, and she admitted that she had met some of them, but claimed that nothing physical had happened beyond coffee dates and conversations. The lies continued to evolve as I presented more evidence, and I realized that I would never uncover the complete truth about what had been happening behind my back. As the confrontation continued into the early morning hours, she became increasingly distraught and began making statements about not being able to live without me. She said that calling off the wedding would humiliate her in front of both our families and that she would rather die than face the consequences of what she had done. When I told her that I needed time to think about our future, she escalated to threatening to hurt herself if I left her. I had never seen this side of her personality before, and her emotional volatility frightened me more than her infidelity had. By sunrise, she was in such a state of hysteria that I felt I had no choice but to contact her sister and ask for help. Her sister arrived within an hour and immediately recognized that my fiancé was having some type of psychological crisis that required professional intervention. After speaking with a crisis counselor on the phone, we were advised to take her to the emergency room for a psychiatric evaluation. She was admitted to the behavioral health unit that same morning for what the doctors described as a mental health emergency requiring intensive observation and treatment. I thought this was total BS. She was being hospitalized for threatening to harm herself after I discovered she had been cheating on me, making me the one responsible for managing the aftermath of her choices. With my fiancé now in psychiatric care and our wedding scheduled for 2 days away, I found myself alone, dealing with the practical nightmare of canceling everything we had planned. I am currently a full-time graduate student pursuing my master's degree in environmental engineering, while also working part-time at a local consulting firm. The timing of this crisis could not have been worse because I had final projects due the same week as our wedding, and I had already requested extensions from my professors to accommodate our honeymoon plans. Now I was faced with the impossible task of notifying guests, canceling vendors, dealing with deposits, and managing my academic responsibilities while processing the emotional devastation of discovering my partner's betrayal. Her hospitalization meant that she was unavailable to help with any of the wedding cancellations, leaving me to handle everything alone while fielding questions from confused family members and friends. The most difficult calls were to her parents, who were already in town for the wedding and could not understand why their daughter was suddenly in a psychiatric facility. I found myself in the bizarre position of having to explain to her mother that I had discovered evidence of multiple affairs, while also reassuring her that I still cared about her daughter's well-being. Over the next several days, while she received treatment, I methodically dismantled all the wedding plans we had spent months creating together. Some vendors were understanding about the circumstances and offered partial refunds, while others kept our deposits, citing their cancellation policies. The financial loss was significant, but it felt insignificant compared to the emotional cost of realizing that the person I had planned to spend my life with had been living a lie. During this same period, I was trying to maintain my focus on school while dealing with what felt like the complete collapse of my plans. My professors were supportive when I explained the situation, but I still had academic obligations that could not be indefinitely postponed, regardless of my personal crisis. The stress of managing everything alone while processing my grief and anger was overwhelming, and I found myself questioning every decision I had made over the past 4 years. For the first week of her hospitalization, I maintained hope that we might somehow work through this crisis and rebuild our relationship on a foundation of honesty. I visited her twice during the limited visiting hours, bringing her favorite magazines and the comfort items she had requested through her sister. During these visits, she appeared remorseful and claimed that the therapy sessions were helping her understand why she had sabotaged our relationship. She spoke about childhood abandonment issues and fear of commitment that had supposedly driven her to seek validation from multiple men online. Her explanations sounded rehearsed, like talking points she had practiced with her therapist, but I wanted to believe that she was genuinely working toward recovery. I continued to handle the practical matters of canceling the wedding, including returning wedding gifts and addressing questions from confused relatives who had not yet been informed about our situation. The second week of her treatment marked a dramatic shift in both her behavior and my perspective on our future. She stopped accepting my phone calls and refused to see me during visiting hours, communicating only through her sister when she needed personal items from our apartment. According to her sister, she was making progress in therapy, but needed space to work through her issues without the pressure of trying to repair our relationship simultaneously. This explanation felt like another manipulation, especially since she had been begging me not to leave her just days earlier. The silence from someone who had claimed she could not live without me was more telling than any confession she could have made. During this period of no contact, I learned through mutual friends that Larry was actually her supervisor at the financial planning firm where she worked. The revelation that she had been having an affair with her boss added a new layer of betrayal because she had spoken highly of him during our entire relationship. She had mentioned Larry numerous times over the past year, always in professional context, describing him as a mentor who helped advance her career. Now I understood that her supposed late nights at the office and weekend meetings had been opportunities to pursue an inappropriate relationship with someone in a position of authority over her. The realization that she had been lying about Larry specifically, rather than just hiding his existence, made me question every story she had ever told me about her workplace. One afternoon, during her second week of treatment, she finally called me directly for the first time since her admission. The conversation lasted less than 2 minutes and consisted entirely of her asking whether she had received any important mail at our address. When I told her that nothing had come for her, she thanked me briefly and hung up without asking about my well-being or how I was coping with the aftermath of her choices. The casual tone of her voice, as if she were checking in with the roommate rather than the man whose life she had devastated, was the final confirmation I needed about her true character. That phone call was the moment when my desire to salvage our relationship died, and my focus shifted entirely to protecting myself from further damage. I spent the rest of that afternoon researching family law attorneys who specialize in complex relationship dissolution and asset protection. Even though we were not legally married, we had accounts we shared and a lease on our apartment that would need to be addressed. The next morning, I contacted an attorney to seek answers and scheduled a consultation to discuss my options for separating dealing with these bank accounts. The lawyer explained that while we had no legal obligations to each other as unmarried partners, our shared assets and debts would require careful documentation to ensure a clean separation. He recommended that I immediately remove her access to any financial accounts where I was the primary holder and document all shared property to prevent disputes later. The consultation fee was $300. This expense cost me a little, but not much, but I recognized that protecting my financial future was worth the investment. So I removed her from all of my credit cards. I have a 680 credit score and didn't want her using any of my credit cards. For the first time since discovering her betrayal, I felt like I was taking control of the situation rather than simply reacting to the chaos she had created. That evening, I called my parents and explained the situation, including her hospitalization and my decision to end our relationship permanently. My mother was supportive but concerned about the financial implications of canceling everything so close to the wedding date. My father was more direct in his response, saying that anyone who would cheat with their boss while planning a wedding was not someone I should trust with my future. Both of my parents offered to help with the remaining wedding cancellations. They encouraged me to prioritize my own well-being over any obligation I might feel to support her through her recovery. Their perspective helped me realize that her mental health crisis, while serious, did not erase the deliberate choices she had made to betray our relationship. I was not responsible for fixing the problems she had created, and my priority was to protect myself from further emotional and financial damage. The remainder of that week passed quickly as I focused on school assignments I had been neglecting and began the process of reclaiming my independence. She was released from the psychiatric facility exactly 2 weeks after her admission, but instead of coming home, she went to stay with her parents. Her sister called to inform me of the discharge and asked if I could pack up her belongings so they could be picked up without any direct contact between us. I agreed to this arrangement because it seemed like the cleanest way to handle the separation without creating additional drama or emotional confrontations. I methodically sorted through our possessions, keeping anything I had purchased individually and packing everything that belonged to her. The engagement ring sat in its original box on our dresser, and I decided to keep it rather than let her profit from her betrayal. Her sister arrived the next afternoon with a small truck and seemed genuinely apologetic about the entire situation. During the loading process, she mentioned that my former fiance was still receiving therapy and taking medication for anxiety and depression related to her recent breakdown. I appreciated the update, but made it clear that while I hoped she would recover fully, I had no intention of resuming our relationship regardless of her progress. Her sister said she understood and thanked me for handling everything with such consideration despite how badly I had been treated. Before leaving, She handed me an envelope containing a handwritten letter from my former fiance. I waited until after she had driven away before opening it, wanting privacy to process whatever final message she had chosen to send. The letter was 3 pages long and contained mostly excuses and self-pity, rather than genuine accountability for her actions. She wrote about feeling trapped by wedding pressure and claimed that her affairs had been a misguided attempt to convince herself that I was the right person for her. According to her version of events, she had never intended to hurt me and had gotten carried away with online flirtations that escalated beyond her control. The letter included no genuine apology for the deception she had practiced for months, just explanations for why her behavior was understandable given her mental state. She ended by saying that she hoped someday I would be able to forgive her and that she would always consider me the love of her life. Reading those words felt like being manipulated one final time by someone who still did not understand the magnitude of what she had done to our relationship. I threw the letter away without responding because engaging with her justifications would only prolong my healing process. Over the following weeks, I focused on making the apartment my own space and establishing new routines. The process of making the apartment mine again was surprisingly therapeutic and helped me visualize the independent future I was building. I learned through mutual friends that she had returned to work at the financial planning firm where Larry was her supervisor, confirming my suspicions about the ongoing nature of their relationship. Several people mentioned that she seemed to be presenting herself as the victim in our breakup, claiming that I had been unsupportive during her mental health crisis. This revisionist history initially bothered me, but I realized that anyone who knew the facts would see through her manipulation tactics. My focus during this period was entirely on completing my graduate degree requirements and rebuilding my sense of personal identity outside of the relationship that had shaped my 20s. By the semester's end, I had completed all the requirements for my master's degree in environmental engineering, earning a final GPA that qualified me for honors recognition. Instead of the honeymoon we had planned, I used my spring break to visit my brother in Colorado for a week of hiking and reflection. This self-reflection helped me understand that her betrayal, while devastating at the time, had likely prevented a much worse discovery years into a marriage. The financial losses from the canceled wedding were significant, but I was young enough to rebuild my savings and now possessed hard-earned wisdom about choosing a life partner. 2 months after she had collected her belongings, I finally decided to sell the engagement ring on Facebook Marketplace. The ring had cost me $4,200 when I purchased it, and I managed to sell it for $2,800 to a nervous young man who was planning his proposal. When I returned from Colorado, I felt ready to close this painful chapter and begin building something better, having gained clarity from the experience. Final update. About 7 months after I canceled the wedding, I received an unexpected call from her sister, which provided the closure I had not realized I needed. My former fiancé had been terminated from her position at the financial planning firm after the senior partners discovered her inappropriate relationship with Larry. According to her sister, someone had reported the affair to upper management, and both she and Larry were dismissed for violating the company's professional conduct policies. Her sister also mentioned that the relationship with Larry had ended shortly after they were both fired, leaving my former fiancé unemployed and single within the span of 2 weeks. Since then, she had apparently been cycling through relationships with various men she met through dating apps, none lasting longer than a few weeks. Her family was concerned about her increasingly erratic behavior and inability to maintain stable employment or relationships. I listened to this update with a mixture of sympathy and vindication, feeling bad for someone who was struggling, while also recognizing that these were natural consequences of her choices. Her sister asked if I would consider speaking with her because she had expressed regret about how everything had ended between us, I politely declined, explaining that I had moved forward with my life and saw no benefit in reopening communication with someone who had caused me so much pain. The conversation reinforced my decision to cut all ties because it revealed that she was still creating chaos in her personal and professional life months after our separation. During this same period, my own life had been steadily improving in ways that validated my choice to end our relationship. I completed my master's degree with honors and accepted a position at a respected environmental consulting firm, which offered excellent benefits and growth potential. The job required occasional travel to conduct water quality assessments for municipal clients, giving me opportunities to explore different regions while building expertise in my field. My new apartment was smaller than the one I had shared with her, but it felt more like home because every item in it reflected my personal taste and decisions. I had started dating again cautiously, and what I heard about these dating apps terrified me in a sense, given all the scams that were going on. But I met a few nice ladies. My financial situation had also recovered faster than expected, thanks to my new salary and careful budgeting that eliminated the expenses I had been covering for her. The money from selling the engagement ring had helped pay down the wedding-related debt, and I was now building savings toward purchasing my own house within the next few years. Friends and family members frequently commented on how much happier and more confident I seemed compared to the final months of my relationship with her. Looking back, I could recognize signs that our relationship had been deteriorating long before I discovered her affairs, but I had been too invested in the idea of marriage to acknowledge the problems. Her betrayal had been devastating at the time. Still, it had ultimately saved me from a much worse fate. Discovering her true character after years of marriage and potentially having children. The wedding that never happened had cost me thousands of dollars and months of emotional turmoil, but it had also saved me from a lifetime of being married to someone who was fundamentally dishonest. When people asked for advice about relationships, I always encouraged them to trust their instincts when something felt wrong and to value actions over words when evaluating a partner's character. The best revenge against someone who had tried to manipulate and use me was living well and building a future with people who shared my values. 2 years later, I could honestly say that discovering her affairs 3 days before our wedding was one of the best things that ever happened to me, even though it had not felt that way at the time.